hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right now so you never miss an episode of Operation Truth. Send us an email, ask your questions, and very possibly we'll address your question on the air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is August 28th, 2023. This is Operation Truth. As always, my cohort, Tom Fuentes, former Assistant Director of the FBI, co-host, was with us today. Observations and comments, of course, from Tom. There's always some rather interesting insight and knowledge Tom has of a number of issues, even those that involve outside our borders. I want to start out by just making a quick observation because this past week we've indicted a president for the fourth time. What's interesting about this conversation is that for those who are wallowing in this and salivating over this indictment, please understand something. None of this translates to anything good for this country. And when you're investigating the president for possible treason, bribery, collusive behavior with countries that are adversarial in nature to assist or be a party to his son activities, not good for the country. I think you're getting the substance of this comment. These activities are not good for the country. I do want to talk about the migration issue, as I always do, almost every single episode of this podcast. I've been talking about this border issue, this immigration policy, since we started under the branding of Between the Lines. Hasn't gotten better. In fact, it's getting more interesting. Karen Bass, mayor of Los Angeles, is rather concerned over the fact that they dropped a bus of migrants in Los Angeles. I find that interesting considering it's a sanctuary city. And I know what's driving it. They have such a homeless problem there, such a problem with mental health. They don't need any more to be, poured onto them. They're seeing what's going on in New York. They're watching the governor in the state of Massachusetts declare a state of emergency over the migration issue. She sees it coming her way. I think the exercise at this point is that Texas wants everyone to experience what the impact of this failed migration policy is. I did want to just brush on this Jacksonville shooting from 2 days ago. Don't know what to say, guys. If you have that much hate in your heart because of color of somebody's skin, religious background, ethnicity, lifestyle choices, cultural, then you have too much free time on your hands. And unfortunately, this is going to transition into a conversation about gun control, which has nothing to do with this. It's a vehicle. So if the guy had driven into a yard full of minority children and run them down, we wouldn't be talking about gun control, but we would be talking about banning vehicles. We're going to have an interesting gentleman with us today, Dr. Rob, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's Eshman or Ekman. It's one of the two, but I'll get a clarification on this gentleman. He is a professor in Columbia University, up at Columbia University, and he also has a relationship with Harvard as well. He touches on some interesting, sensitive discussion about racism and the media and just the climate in which we're living today, which is very troubling. But I remind you, the reason it's so troubling is because we lack the leadership, to try to keep everybody a little calm and to explain to everyone it's okay that we're different. That's what makes the world go round. And there's plenty of room for us, to make these accommodations. I do want to remind everyone, one of the issues that's hamstringing the country is the growth, the population of the country, which has doubled since the administration of John Kennedy in 1960. Everything increases, the population increase exponentially. The number of mental ill people, say per 10,000 or 100,000, that number increases. Homeless, same deal. Our veterans, different discussion. Don't know where to start with this discussion. We seem to be capable of funding a war in the Ukraine to the tune of about $115 billion, and we have veterans living on the street. I don't know how much shame we must be mired in before we pick our head up. Just a quick revisit. Last week, the president visited Maui after about 15 days and leaving his vacation spot in Lake Tahoe. He was given the finger, an expletive gesture. And then, of course, they would basically tell him, go the F home. where have you been for 15 days? And of course, he tried to liken a house fire, in his kitchen to what these people experience. You almost don't know what to say about this. And tragically, this is not about telling you guys who to vote for. We're way past that. We're too evolved for that. I wouldn't be so presumptive to think that I could tell you who to vote for. I just say see the forest for the trees, your borders, your major cities, the cost of a gallon of gasoline, groceries, your energy sector, your foreign policy, which just is disgusting. And try to come to your own conclusion without being spoon-fed. We're here to give you food for thought. But if you watch some of our media outlets, as I mentioned earlier, CNN, MSNBC, they're elated over the fact that Trump's been indicted for the 4th time. We're making a mockery of our judicial system. We're destroying the credibility of every institution. And you know what, Tom, I have a feeling you have something to say about that. So what are you thinking on this topic?
Well, I think it's clear. We have a weaponized system of justice that goes against conservatives, Republicans, and public enemy number one in their eyes, Donald J. Trump. And so you have prosecutors in New York at the state level, at the city level, the prosecutor, Fannie, in Fulton County, Georgia, their campaign was to get Trump. They were going to get Trump. Didn't matter that all the murders that happened in Atlanta, it's one of the most dangerous cities on the planet, and they're not prosecuting them like they should. That doesn't matter. They're going to get Trump. And then, of course, you have the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, and the indictment that he's brought back and the issues he's raised. I think so many questions about it, and legal scholars in the country, very notable constitutional scholars, are raising all kinds of issues individually with each indictment and then collectively. So right now you have a former president of the United States, for what he said or what he thought as far as the election not being fair when Joe Biden was elected. You have him now facing about 800 years in prison for 91 counts that he's been charged with that are just absurd. When they talk RICO statute, the state of Georgia RICO statute, I've looked at that. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what happened there.
My friend, explain to them what the RICO statute is, because many of the listeners may not fully understand what that is. And that's
this is a state RICO statute. The federal RICO statute was passed in 1970, written by Professor Robert Blakey of Notre Dame, who had worked for Bobby Kennedy in the Justice Department during the John F. Kennedy administration. RICO, the name is Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations. And what essentially it lists, the federal statute lists about 8 crimes that are called RICO predicates. One of these crimes has to be alleged and convicted to qualify for RICO. Now, the other idea is it's supposed to be 2 or more conspirators breaking these crimes, and they all don't have to know each other. You can have a conspiracy of 50 people. It can be the Gambino, La Cosa Nostra family in New York. They don't all have to know each other or deal directly, but in general, it's designed to say you have a class of people in this country that are professional criminals. RICO was designed to go after them. They make their living committing crimes and committing one of the specified RICO predicate crimes. And then if they're convicted of that, the sentencing is severe. The fines are severe. So they could be facing what might be 10 years in prison on loan sharking or some other charge like that, extortion, fraud, bribery. Under RICO, it might carry triple penalty. It might be 30 years in prison. It might be life without parole, which is what John Gotti, boss of the Gambino family, ultimately was sentenced to, life without parole. And in the federal system, that means life. There's no good behavior. You get out in 2 years. So even Gotti, who developed throat cancer while in prison, they said, okay, we have prison hospitals. You're going to get operated on in Springfield, Missouri hospital. You're not getting out. And that applied to anybody convicted that way, whether it's a terrorist, drug trafficker, or gangster, organized crime member. And that isn't just Italian organized crime. It can be an Asian group, Russian group, other nationalities. It doesn't matter. But that's how that statute was designed. It is not designed for a group of politicians asking questions about the election in that county of Georgia, wanting to know, how did you count this? What happened? How come you're missing so many votes?
If I may, sir, can you draw the distinction between the state RICO? You just outlined what the federal RICO statute is.
Well,
Get into what RICO is.
state RICO is very strict, and I use that RICO statute in my career running the organized crime program of the FBI. What the RICO statute for a federal prosecution requires the authority, permission granted by the Department of Justice. So a U.S. attorney could bring a charge of murder or extortion, but to bring RICO, and he could prosecute those on his own with no other authority but his own. But under RICO, it requires Department of Justice authority. Now, looking at the state statute and what these individuals have been charged with, it's a very broad statute. So what you have here is phone calls made by Donald Trump, made by Mark Meadow and a few others that are basically asking the authorities in Georgia, in Fulton County, how'd you come up with this number? What about this group of votes? What about that group of votes? And they were questioning, they wanted a court date, which in the Georgia statute is allowed, and they're supposed to be given it. They never were given it. So you have all of these almost minor charges, phone calls, requests for meetings, requests for explanations, that suddenly becomes a RICO conspiracy, and they're all out to overthrow the election and all of this. And the irony of that is that one of the leading election deniers in Georgia was Stacey Abrams when she didn't win the governor campaign, and she still questions that. You have these anybody losing an election raises issues. Wait a minute, the election wasn't fair, or it was stolen from me. Hillary Clinton in 2016, the election was stolen, the Russians did it. There's always some excuse, but they question it, and they still question it. To this day, they call Donald Trump's first term illegitimate. He wasn't really elected. So it's okay for Democrats when they lose to question an election, and some Republicans when they lose to question it, but not Donald Trump or anybody that supported Donald Trump in the 2020 election. And that's what the difference is, that it's clearly a weaponized set of charges just to get Donald Trump or anybody that ever said a good thing about Donald Trump.
The world is in crisis, with political unrest and financially unstable countries trying to print their way to prosperity by taking on trillions of dollars of new debt. It's incredibly concerning. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. So call today to receive the free hard asset information kit on how easy it is to own silver. Green energy demands will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
You know, Tom, the thing with Trump is he has his own unique set of circumstances attached to him. He's outside the Beltway. He has little or no reverence for our political system as a whole, as you know. He has a lot of detractors on the Republican side as well. But independent of that, there are things that he did for the country that were actually positive. And, you know, we're going to have some interesting days ahead of us. You know, we're starting to see signage referencing Trump saying no surrender. Not the good way to go. Guys, I do have to just inform you that Dr. Eshman had a conflict this afternoon and he was unable to make the show. I do want to remind you, though, not too long into the show, we're going to have Christian Briggs come out with an update regarding transitioning to digital currency and some really pertinent information regarding the direction the country intends on going and learning about us and potentially controlling us. You know, Tom, I want to transition for a second into the debate. You and I brushed up against it rather briefly. And, you know, I have my own assessments of each of the candidates. I mean, I happen to think that as far as an administrator goes and a proven commodity, DeSantis kind of stands on his own. I listen to Chris Christie become a very watered down version, but very similar. And his aggression, he almost seems like an angry guy, and his attacks on Vivek Ramaswamy. And what I found interesting was, he referenced him as having no experience and not being sufficiently backgrounded. And unfortunately, Ramaswamy, who's only 38 years old, hasn't learned to think on his feet. His response should have been very simple. All of you career politicians, look what a great job you've done. Look at the condition of this country. Maybe we need the infusion of someone that hasn't drank the Kool-Aid. And then, of course, Nikki Haley, who lost ground with me, she became rather aggressive with him. I think she referenced this isn't time for amateur hour. Same response. All of the status quo have done a stunning job here, as well as the people that are so educated in the country that you and I are familiar with that expression from the Kennedy administration, the best and the brightest. I jokingly say, look what the smart people have done to us. I'm not dismayed, but I think we need a real dynamic leader at this point that hopefully can cross the aisles in their agenda to try to galvanize this country. But whether people like to admit this or not, and I'm not telling anybody who to vote for, because I don't care who you vote for, that's your business. There's a problem with the Democrats, but I will tell you something interesting, Tom. They may not agree on student repayment. They may not agree on the border. They may not agree on a number of topics. When this word Trump comes in, it galvanizes that discussion. The other guy that was disappointing was the former vice president. He got a little too aggressive. He wouldn't yield when his time was up, and not to a little extent. He almost became offensive in the way that he did it. And I wish he'd stop bringing up all his religious concerns, because quite candidly, the number one concern in the country today, Tom, and I think you'll agree with me, is the economy. So I'd be curious to hear what your perspective was on our candidates as well. I know that you and I have similar thinking on some of them.
Well, I think the economy, while they always say it's the economy, stupid, and all that, going back to James Carville, Clinton's campaign manager, forget everything else, it's the economy. But the reality is, right now, we're at a point in our country, it's way more than the economy, as if the economy wasn't bad enough. Inflation and all the other issues of the economy, the decline of the US dollar, which Christian will talk about later. Many of these other issues are very, very important as far as the economy and the new digital currency that's coming and all of those issues. But so is the status of our culture, this woke culture that's going on, and it's permeated everything from education to politics to the military, all of that. And it's doing severe damage to the country. And you have basically, under the Biden administration, Merrick Garland, Attorney General, issuing a memo last year that basically says if a parent shows up at a school board meeting to contest the idea that their children are being subjected to critical race theory or improper information about their sexual orientation and what to do about it, all of that those parents are domestic terrorists. And very similar to the Richmond FBI memo that went out this past January 23rd, that said these Catholic churches that are doing the Catholic Mass in Latin are domestic terrorists or could be harboring. And we've got to investigate and infiltrate and develop informants and send them in. And then the director of the FBI lied about that. Oh, but this was only one office. Richmond, and I immediately had those documents removed from the federal system. Nobody else is doing this. When I heard about this, I was aghast and ordered a review to go in there and fix this. Now, I had been an inspector during a point of my career in the FBI. That kind of review should have taken 8 days at the most, not 8 months, because in July, Ray testifies to Jim Jordan. He testifies to Josh Hawley in the Senate that, well, we're doing this review, and we started this review back when I heard about this, and both ask him, when's that review going to be completed? He says, by the end of summer. So in other words, an inspection process that should have gotten to the bottom of this in a matter of days doesn't take days, it takes 8 months. And then he's just basically saying, well, we should get this done. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Now, I had been an inspector, as I said. In my day, to have a team go in there into Richmond and do these signed sworn statements with the special agent in charge, assistant special agent in charge, the chief division counsel, who's the head lawyer of the office, who all signed off on this memo going out, in my day, that would have been career threatening, because it would have come up that even though it might not have been their fault, they're still responsible for the management of the office and for the reputation of the FBI, which gets diminished to the point where they lose effectiveness. To me, that applies to Christopher Wray himself. The ratings, the downhill ratings of the FBI have not been reversed by him. Now going on, 6-7 years, he promised to fix that, restore the credibility and reputation of the Bureau. Just the opposite has happened. So even if it's not his fault, he's responsible and he should be held accountable and he should be fired. So that's what many of my colleagues, we were all executives together. We all came up the chain together as supervisors, assistant special agents in charge, special agents in charge, assistant directors at headquarters, to a person. And these are all former colleagues, but current friends of mine still. And we were each other. They agree 100% that what's happened to the FBI in the last 5, 6, 7 years, the double standard that's been created, the weaponization that's been created, the Russiagate, Russia complete hoax, sponsored by a dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, putting that out there, the FBI opening a several-year investigation. All of these things combined have helped to ruin the current reputation of the FBI. And it used to be one of the very top federal agencies that have the complete respect of the U.S. population.
Well, I think globally it's been recognized as the quintessential law enforcement entity.
It still is. It still
Yeah.
is outside the United States. I travel all over the world, even now, and I've been to more than 90 countries. I was on the executive committee of Interpol, and then I ran FBI international operations, the 80 offices, 78 at the time, of the FBI located in embassies and consulates worldwide outside the United States. And even now, when I'm talking to a local official, or I'm talking to a citizen, or I'm in a restaurant and meet somebody new, and they learn that I had been an executive, special agent of the FBI, they go, the amount of respect that they heap on me is evident. They haven't heard the nuancing of the FBI going after pro-life people and not going after the people that are firebombing, these pro-life clinics. They don't hear all that, and they don't believe that. So they still believe the FBI is number one in the world. That hasn't gone away, but that's through nobody's credit locally or through the director's credit. That's just that the news doesn't cover it overseas to that extent. And of course, the news, just imagine if the news wasn't on the side of this right-wing position or left-wing position of the FBI, how much worse that reputation. The reputation of the Bureau, the people that think it's not effective anymore or not doing the job, that might be 90% instead of 60 or 70. So in that case, the lack of media coverage or the complete media bias is almost a benefit to keeping the American people ignorant.
Tom, it seems like we've developed a propensity to destroy the credibility of every institution. If you talk to people, and I just kind of randomly speak to people, no matter where I go, they don't trust the government. They don't trust the media. We've degraded our police departments. We've harmed the credibility of the FBI. I hate to say it, the Secret Service kind of shot themselves in the foot a couple of times with Cartagena and some antics at the White House, whether it was breaches or going through crime scenes or whatever the hell it was with them. But, we need to turn the course of this country, in a different direction. And that's why the leadership in 2024 is critical. I really don't care who we elect at this point. That has to be someone that can pull all these ends back to where they, back to the middle or back where they belong. What's so tragic about the FBI was always the holdout, the stronghold, that when all else failed, the Bureau held the line. And we both came from local law enforcement. We have our own culture and we talk our own language. And it's different than federal agencies. The FBI was really blind in the pursuit of their justice, and that's why they were so damn effective. I have, other than yourself, numerous friends generationally that were assistant directors and SACs and field officers in criminal in LA and wherever. And I know you know a lot of them, Ed Best and Ed Pisty and Rich Garcia and Steve Martinez. You know a lot of the same people I know.
Right.
I mean, this is heart-wrenching to see what they've done to this agency. But the most important thing to remember, Tom, 99% of the men and women in this agency still believe in the mission. We have a handful.
You know what backs that up, Lou, and I've talked to a senior executive in the Human Resources Division of the FBI, the hiring. And this is just about maybe a month ago now, having lunch together. And he was telling me that a large percentage of the candidates to be special agents are police officers leaving these woke departments where they're being defunded and sold down the river, or former military that want to leave the woke military as it now exists. So you have this large percentage, more than half of the applicants at that level, former cops, former military personnel. Now, when I joined the FBI in '79, in my new agent class of 30, we had 6 former police officers, and we had probably 4 or 5 former military. So 10 out of 30, we had 1/3. That number has increased. So many of the really outstanding police officers and military officers have joined the FBI. So that's why at the lowest level, when they talk about defunding the FBI or throwing it away, you're going to have a hard time in the lower ranks of the 12, 13,000 agents being able to, replace them with quality people if you throw out everybody, the baby with the bathwater. So I think that's why I don't advocate, and I would argue with a number of people, plus the excellent relationships that the Bureau has with foreign law enforcement, which makes a big difference in organized crime, the program I ran for 5 years of my career, or in counterterrorism or national security or white collar crime, these international fraud cases, you name it, those cases and the international help we get and the international help we give so that we do get it when we need it is instrumental. And so you have many people in the Bureau that are key players in the success of the FBI over the past years and now. And so just the idea of we're going to throw them all out is pretty stupid, in my opinion. And I'd be happy to get on that debate stage and debate that issue with anybody up there that thinks that's a good idea to defund and eliminate the FBI and throw all these people out.
You know what's unfortunate, Tom, is that men like yourself and Chris Schwecker can't revisit the FBI because you could reinstill the standards and the honor and the integrity and the fidelity of this group probably in about 15 minutes. It's almost difficult to understand that people like Comey, Strzok, Lisa Page, McCabe, and there was another gentleman that just took a hit in Washington, D.C. during the year. I can't remember his name, but he was a SAC in the field office in Washington. That they don't understand what they've done, not just to the Bureau, but to the country. It's one thing they're playing politics using the Bureau to do that. And I think the exchanges between Strzok and Lisa Page kind of synopsized it. But understand what you've done to the country here. And, the word that's missing in the conversation today is accountability. I think you'll agree with that, I do want to go back to the debate for 1 second, because I listened to Nikki Haley make a reference to the Ukraine as a cornerstone. I don't know what cornerstone she's referencing, to be very candid with you. I have my own perspective. It's just an opinion, guys. I'm not telling you something that's necessarily factually based, because it's difficult to filter through fact and fiction in our country today. But I do know that this thing is a money pit. Governor DeSantis, during the debate, spoke to the fact that there's a disproportionate level of commitment and engagement by the United States. And he's going like, where's Europe on this? That's what Donald Trump said also, disproportionate spending. We're not saying abandon the Ukraine, but now we have 31 NATO nations, 29 are on the continent of Europe. Take the lion's share on. When did it all fall on our back? I don't get this. And what people don't understand, it's not just we're listening to $115 billion being spent, Tom. That's taxpayer money. That's taxpayer money that could be allocated, if not all of it, probably the majority of it, to our veterans, to our homeless on the streets, to our mentally ill, all of whom we give a lot of lip service to. You know, the one thing that this country has developed is this policy or practice of intentionally deceiving the public. I hate to use this term lie because that's such an assaulting term, but that's what it is. They lie to us about everything. They lied about this border issue. They lied about gun control. They're lying about masks. They lied about the vaccine. No. What they did with the vaccine was very simple. They decided to politicize it and then weaponize it to go after a presidential administration. You know it and I know it. That's just the MO here. And I've got to be honest. I'm not sure the Republicans wouldn't have done that if they had a sitting president who was a Democrat. You know, we're getting to the point we need a scorecard to keep track of the players here. But I do know this: the growth, the population growth of the country, you know, it's too much. You know, contrary to what people are being told by the 5.5 million people, this is a month ago's estimate, have been coming into the country. They neglect to inform you what the number is regarding individuals overstaying their visas, which is normally the majority of violators of our immigration law, and the northern border, which they just gloss over here and there. We've spoken about this, Tom, before. I've spoken about it on the other podcast, Between the Lines. And by the way, guys, we want you to become part of this conversation. You can email us at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. You've got to become part of this conversation. You have to speak to people who are your friends, your neighbors, whomever. Get them to listen. We're not trying to tell you who to vote for. We're trying to give you food for thought. And in saying that, we're not spoon feeding you. Become your own investigator. Some of these issues Tom and I speak to, it's like the forest before the trees. You've got to want to see it. Then the other expression is you better come in from the rain. Tom, I think we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come right back and we're going to continue this conversation on a myriad of topics that are pigeonholing this country today. So stay with us, guys. This is Operation Truth. Tom Fuentes, my co-host, myself, and we'll be with you in a second.
Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
We're back. This is Operation Truth. Tom Fuentes, former Assistant Director of the FBI, I'm proud to say is my co-host. Tom contributes so much to this conversation. It's just overwhelming. And I've been around a lot of people, a lot of smart people, government, people in the entertainment industry, business. Tom is in a league of his own. You know, I received an email from a gentleman regarding a lawsuit that's now pending with Elon Musk because SpaceX refused to hire someone who basically was not legally permitted to work in the country. And you would think that a corporation would have the right to establish its own criteria and be guided by it. I guess not in this instance, because this individual, who is not of legal status here, doesn't have a green card, work papers, whatever, has chosen to sue him. There's something else attached to this discussion, guys, that I've spoken to you about numerous occasions when I was doing Between the Lines. You know, we rebranded because through the whole course of Between the Lines, we latched onto this one term that resonated. It's the truth. So we rebranded to Operation Truth to get away from this, you know, prior branding issue. But here's really, and Tom, you know, I need to get you back on because I know you can contribute to this greatly. We have no vetting process in place, ladies and gentlemen, contrary to public opinion. Maybe they're misleading us again. Let me give you some numbers. Approximately 800,000 people, 800,000 law enforcement agents, I correct myself, 800,000 law enforcement agents in a population of over, let's see, 360 million people, to put it to you politely. What vetting process are you talking about? We've let in at least 10 million people. Don't listen to the 5.5. That's just intentionally misleading you. And oh, by the way, just start to look at some of your major cities, New York, LA, state like Massachusetts. Everybody's having a problem with this. We don't have the ability to vet because of the number of individuals dedicated to the vetting process. It isn't happening. Not to mention, many of these countries that are the points of origin for many of these migrants, there are no databases, and there's no inclination for them to exchange information with us, whether it's Guatemala, Honduras, Ecuador, pick a place, folks. I don't know what to say to you about this, but this is just so disingenuous to make you think that the people they've let into this country, we vetted. Tommy, you there with me, buddy? I'd like to hear your perspective on this.
Well, you just mentioned a minute ago about people overstaying visas and how serious that is, and it is. But in no way does it compare to the people flooding the border, southern border, and now even more at the northern border, because a person here on a visa had some level of vetting to get the visa. So yeah, they stayed over, they stayed too long, but we know who they are. We've gone through their background, and they were vetted to come in, to get that, whether they're one of the 360,000 Chinese students in the United States, or students from all over, or other business people that came in and got a chance to come in and have a visa to enter the United States, supposed to stay a certain length of time, and then they overstay. That doesn't, to me, compare to the millions that have poured across, especially the southern border, that we know are from about 150 different countries in the world with no vetting. Now, just a reminder to do my usual history lesson. When Donald Trump first became president, you remember he listed 7 countries that we shouldn't let them in. We shouldn't let residents or citizens of those countries come in. And there was a big hue and cries banning Muslims. Well, I said at the time on CNN, when I was a contributor there, that he's not banning Muslims. The largest Muslim country in the world is Indonesia. The second largest, Malaysia. And no ban there. He was banned, and the list of 7 countries was actually Obama's list, where Obama said we have no ability to vet whether they're coming from Syria or Libya or a couple other countries that were named. They were not able to be vetted, and that's why Donald Trump, now he banned them. There's all kinds of lawsuits filed about terrible and bigoted and Islamophobia and all that. But it was upheld ultimately because Obama selected those countries, because the Obama administration was unable to vet them to come in. And same thing with the Trump administration. They had no ability to vet them. So that's, some of these differences are politicized. And by politicized, I mean lied about. American public is told a series of lies. Therefore, that contributes to Trump's an Islamophobe. He's not letting these people in. And as I mentioned, the most Muslims in the world, Indonesia and Malaysia, and the Muslim population of Indonesia, by the way, is greater than the total number of Muslims in the Middle East, Africa, or Europe. None of them were banned. So,
Tom, just as always, you've been incredibly articulate and explaining some very relevant information. Just to revisit this discussion, Tom, you're right, we're being flooded at the border. But prior to this border siege, which started with the Biden administration, coincidentally, I guess, the majority of the people that overstayed their visas were the main number of people violating our immigration laws. What I find interesting is that they don't volunteer that number anymore, Tom. And they don't volunteer the number at the northern border. As far as the rest, I mean, look, and I know, the media is at the root of the problem in the country. We're looking for a voice of reason. We're looking for a demographic that has an inclination to tell us the truth because they love the country overall, not their agenda. The public just really doesn't understand how dangerous the media has become. And what's interesting is there's no oversight with the media, Tom. But, I find it interesting with this 5.5. I tell you, I'm just spitballing, Tom. I say 10 million people have come into this country since this administration, took office. And we don't even have a number from the northern border. Do you happen to know of one?
no.
That's my point. And don't you think it's clearly relevant? I know that we're able through technology, for example, to get gotaways, detect gotaways, drones and cameras. What do we have on the northern border, Tom? Do you have any knowledge of what we're doing on the northern border to monitor penetration from Canada, for example?
No, people aren't going to know that because you have a wide open border along the U.S.-Canadian border. So there's some border crossings into Montana, let's say as an example, where it's a 2-lane road. There's no customs or passport control or anything else. Now, Normally in the past, you had people that maybe worked on one side of the border or the other, or had family on one side. Wasn't a big deal. They come over to the US, or go shopping, whatever, and then they go back. But there's no way to know for sure. There's no monitoring, there's no vetting, there's no border control, there's none of that. So we don't know. We don't know how many are coming in.
This is an interesting point you're making, Tom, the same one I'm making. Don't you think it's incumbent upon this country to determine how would you say, vulnerable we are, how porous we are? I mean, it's like the cuckoo left the clock here, or we've got the institution being run by the inmates.
Yeah, it should be, but it isn't. We're more worried about the Ukraine border than we are about the U.S. border.
Absolutely. But, Tom, that just resonates in almost every discussion. We talk about gun control. We don't want the American public to be armed. We don't want them to have assault rifles, but we're shipping assault rifles to the Ukraine so they can be distributed to their citizenship, right? So they can fight off the tyranny and invasion from a foreign invader. This is just so typical. And, I don't know quite what to say in regards to this, Tom, but my concern is that we may have gone too far. I'm really concerned that they have caused such a divide and such a polarization in the country that we may not be able to get this back on track. And this show, we remind everyone, I know your heart's in the same place mine is. It's about our young people. You and I are there, Tom. We're pensioned, we have Social Security, we have our own separate enterprises. We have this podcast that we're hoping becomes successful, not because you and I want to be millionaires, but because I believe people like us can change the course of thinking in this country, get it back on track, and start to just explain people. You got to relax. Stop holding on too tight, folks, and understand that the people that are here, whether they're gay, straight, lesbian, black, white, Latino, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, they're here to stay. Transgender, they're here to stay. We should be having conversations about how to make sure everybody feels comfortable in being here, and reminding everybody at the same time, just stay in your lane. I think with this whole thing as far as transgender, and I don't like this topic because I never want to come off as I'm anti-anybody. I don't have time to be anti-anybody, but you got to stay away from our kids, and I don't care who you are, stay away from our children. But, we lack leadership, Tom. I think the same thing that's resonating right now in the FBI, you'll agree, resonates on a more grand scale with the government. We have the tail wagging the dog at this point. I don't know what else to say, Tom.
No,
I do want to say this.
If I could add a point, Lou, we just this weekend celebrated the anniversary of Martin Luther King's speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial at the reflecting pool. Hundreds of thousands of people attended. What I find the most interesting about Martin Luther King, having read many of the speeches he gave, studied his works, his philosophy, if he was around today, he would be canceled, because his philosophy that you should be judged by the content of your character, not the color of your skin. You have this administration appointing people absolutely having nothing to do with merit, but by the color of their skin, or what sexual orientation they have, or any other number of woke things that have nothing to do with merit. And we've seen that, people being nominated for judgeships, people being nominated to run cabinet offices. We have a Department of Transportation run by a guy whose only qualification, Buttigieg, he's gay, has a male husband. Well, that's it. He should be running that. And then when the train goes off the tracks in East Palestine in Ohio, and the whole town is suffocating with toxic gas in the air and everything else, he doesn't even show up there for a couple of weeks. This is the guy running the program, in charge of the railroads in this country. And so, among others.
Nor did the president show up ever, Tom.
No, I know.
I don't understand.
Well, right now, the president was picked by the U.S. people, allegedly, unfortunately. But, the Buttigieg was picked by the president and then confirmed by the Senate. So he's in his own class of appointees. Remember the guy that was appointed for, the deputy at nuclear research facilities and stealing clothes out of luggage, and what it took for him to finally be fired. And it was amazing he eventually got fired. But we have people like this at all levels. And that's part of the problem here, is that this is the woke country. And going back to my first point, where would Martin Luther King be today if he was preaching the content of character over and above the color of your skin? Where would Bobby Kennedy Sr. be, RFK Jr.'s father? Where would he be if he was here today preaching that philosophy in the Black community or anywhere else? They'd be canceled. The woke country would cancel them.
We're going to wrap it for today. I just want to make one final comment about Buttigieg. Everybody's afraid to be critical of him because they think it's driven by homophobia. It's not the case. In my instance, at least, you look at our transportation issues, you look at the shipping problems, this issue with rail systems. He's absent from the conversation, but he has a little layer of insulation because no one wants to be labeled homophobic. We don't want to be labeled anti-trans. We don't want to be labeled, and that's why people have pulled their tail. And the word that's left our conversation in this country is this word courage. Guys, this has been Operation Truth. Tom and I encourage you to please email us, give us comments, critiques. Hopefully, we're going to continue to progress with this podcast where you'll be able to call in. You can email us at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. And for those of you that have responded to us and sent us questions or comments or critiques, tell us how you feel. We're not threatened. You don't have to agree with us. Tom and I are both very open-minded people. We don't scare easy, and we're not threatened by anybody's views if they differ from ours. That's what makes the world go round. That's what's lacking today, this inability to make people understand everybody's part of this discussion. Tom, I thank you for being my partner here.
Thank you.
You are exceptional, my friend. TJ, I thank you as well. And we're going to be back next week. Thank you, guys.